Hey, what's going on everybody? It's etaprime back here again. Today we're going to be taking a look at the brand new ONEXPLAYER Mini Pro. Now this is the AMD version, but keep in mind they are offering two different variants. You can pick it up with the Intel i7-1260p, or the one we have here, which is the one I would definitely recommend, the Ryzen 7 6800U. And by the way, we've got the black version here, but they're also offering a white variant. Not a lot has changed with the overall design when you compare it to the older 5800U powered ONEXPLAYER Mini, but we do have that RGB right there on the palm rest, or the handles as they call them. And I really do like this setup. Now, I'm not a huge RGB fan. I don't go all out with my gaming PCs, but adding a little here definitely makes it pop. So inside of the box, basically what you're going to get here is the handheld itself, a user manual, USB Type-C cable, and a 65-watt fast charger. So like I mentioned, not much has changed from the design except for the RGB on the sides here. Even when it comes to the button layout versus the older Mini Pro, we've got the same layout. On the left-hand side, we've got our D-pad, and these have always worked out really well on these OneX players. We've also got our analog stick, and they opted to use Hall sensors instead of regular old analog sticks, so we don't have to worry about drift down the road. And just like the older units, we've got the orange home button, which will bring us home at any time, and near the top, we've got our select button. Moving over to the right-hand side, ABXY does use conductive pads underneath these. Another Hall sensor-based analog stick. We've also got our start button up top, and you might notice we've got two extra buttons here underneath that analog stick. One of them is going to bring up the on-screen keyboard at any time, and the other one's going to bring up the brand new ONEXPLAYER overlay, and this will allow us to adjust the RGB on the sides here, the TDP of the CPU, fan speed, brightness. It's actually a cool little setup, and we will take a look at that. And I did want to mention that yes, the triggers on this handheld are linear, so this is going to be really great for racing games. You can just give it a little bit of gas or floor it all the way. Taking a look at the top of the unit, we've got a couple extra buttons like our power button and our volume rocker, plus a 3.5mm audio jack. And one thing I always love to see on these handhelds is a full-size USB port. This is USB 3.2, and we've also got USB 4 on this. We've actually got two of them, one up top here, one on the bottom. And yes, even though this is an AMD handheld, it will support an external GPU over Thunderbolt 3 using these USB 4 ports. So overall, I've always loved the look and feel of these ONEXPLAYER Minis. The 8.4 inch is actually one of my favorites just because of that larger screen, but if you've got smaller hands, then that might be a bit big for you. But as making this video, they haven't even announced a Ryzen 6000 8.4 inch one yet, so we'll just have to see down the road. And if I can get my hands on one, if they ever announce it, I will do a review. But when it comes to the AMD version of the brand new ONEXPLAYER Mini Pro, for the CPU, we've got that Ryzen 7 6800U. 8 cores, 16 threads, a base clock of 2.7 GHz, and a boost up to 4.7. We've also got the new built-in Radeon 680M RDNA 2 iGPU. This has 12 compute units up to 2200 MHz. You can pick this up with 16 or 32 GB of RAM, but both of them are using LPDDR5 at 6400 MHz. Also, when it comes to storage, got a couple variants there, 512 GB up to 2 TB, but all of them use a 2280 M.2 SSD. The display is a 7-inch IPS at 1920 by 1200 with 323 pixels per inch. We've also got Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.0, and a built-in 6-axis gyro. They've added a 48 watt-hour battery to this handheld, and we've got 65 watt quick charging capabilities, and they're claiming at 15 watts, when the TDP is set there, we can get 2.5 hours of gameplay out of it, or up to 10 hours of video streaming. Now this one here is running Windows 11 Pro, and that's what they recommend, but there's really nothing stopping us from installing Linux, but just keep in mind, everything we're testing today will be in Windows 11 Pro. Okay, so here it is. The very first thing I wanted to show you here was the OneX Hub. That's what they're calling it. It's basically just an overlay. We can set this up, so all we need to do is press a hotkey and it'll bring it up. From the top, we can change the TDP from 5 watts all the way to 28, but we've got a boost of around 35. So, you know, if you're at 28, you might see it go up to around 35, kind of stabilize around 32. We can also set a static clock on the GPU. Now the 680M iGPU we have here will go up to 2200 MHz, and this does come in really handy for like emulation where you don't need those super high clock speeds. So on most of these, if you just press Y, it'll go to default and kind of auto out. And usually with fan speed, that's what I do. We've also got some vibration adjustment. We can change the intensity directly from here. on-the-fly resolution switcher, and of course we've got the RGB control. There's a lot of different presets in here, and we can also go with static colors, but I've noticed that the static colors aren't as bright. Now, as making this video, there's no way to kind of fully customize a little bit of a gradient here. That would be nice to see in the future, and it's something they could probably add because we've got full RGB. But, you know, from here, if you want to go static with it, you can. But as you see, it's just not super bright right now. But yeah, this is actually really nice to see on these handhelds. You know, in the past with these OneX players, there really hasn't been much proprietary software, which was something we really needed. And they do have plans on kind of creating this into a whole game launcher and everything. But in-game, this will come right up. So we've got that OneX hub, and we can basically adjust all of our performance parameters directly from here or in-game. So another thing I'll show you here, we've got our on-screen keyboard. We can bring this right up by just tapping that button once. Or if we hold it for about 4 seconds, we'll get that little LED. And now we can actually use the built-in controls as a mouse. And again, just tap it. It'll bring up that keyboard. We'll just hold it one more time. It'll turn that completely off. And now we're back to, you know, controller mode. And this little button over here on the left-hand side will close and open up your last used app, or if we're just using a file browser to open that back up. But yeah, I've been messing around with this for the last few days, and it's performed really well, given that we have that Ryzen 7 6800U. And the first thing I want to show you here are some benchmarks that I ran on this unit. Taking a look at some GPU benchmarks with 3D Mark Night Raid. Total score here, 26,322. We also tested Fire Strike with a 6,680. And finally, Time Spy with a 2,735. So out of the 6800U, we have seen higher scores out of each one of these tests that we just ran. But remember, we're sitting right here at 28 watts with that boost up to 35. And some of the other devices we've tested with the same chip actually have it set up so they boost a little higher, maybe even a little longer. But with the way the OneX hub is set up with that 28 watt TDP, kind of comes down really quickly. Now I could fix this using a third-party app, but a lot of people are just going to be using the built-in adjuster that we have here with the OneX hub, so I figured we'd just go with that. But now it's time to get into some gaming and see how this thing really performs. First up, we've got Crysis. So this is the original Crysis, and I always get the question, can it run Crysis? And yeah, this thing can. At 1200p medium settings, we're getting an average over 90 FPS. Not bad at all. We could take it up to high, but I did see some major dips, especially when there was a lot of explosions going on. But yeah, this thing can run Crysis, and if you wanted to go with the remastered version, I'm sure you could do it at 60 FPS with some low-medium settings. Next up, we've got Genshin Impact, and this is one that runs really well on these APUs. 1200p with a high-medium mix. Again, all at high settings when there was just a lot of explosions, lots of particles on screen. We got some dips under 60. I mean, it's manageable, and really, if you didn't have that FPS counter on screen, you'd probably never notice it. But I just turned a few down to medium, and it runs great on this handheld. I also wanted to test out Sonic Frontiers because I recently bought this game, and it does run pretty well at 1200p. We've got a mix of low and high settings. There's really not much that we can change, and hopefully in the future they do add a few more settings, but it's more than playable on this device. And I always have to throw it in because it is one of my favorite racing games right now. We've got Forza Horizon 5, 1200p medium FSR set to balanced. So we can get an average of around 76 FPS, and with a little more wattage we could definitely get more out of this game. Or if you wanted to take that wattage down to around 15, run this at 800p medium settings and lock it at 60. You're going to have a great time with this one. Here's Spiderman Remastered, and this is just one of those games that doesn't perform well on APUs. I mean, it's trying its hardest right now, and we do need more optimizations with this game here. But we're at 800p low FSR set to performance, and these Ryzen 7 6800Us really do try their hardest to run this game over 60, but unfortunately, it's just hard pressed to do it. Now there are a few more settings that we could change. We could go to very low settings and turn FSR to ultra performance, and then we could get a constant 60 out of it, but the game doesn't look great at all like that. And the final PC game I wanted to test here was Modern Warfare 2, so I just went ahead and used the built-in benchmark. We're at the balance preset from the game, and we've got FSR set to balanced. There are more settings that we could actually turn down, but with it set up like this, we got an average of 81 FPS. And I would highly suggest on a handheld like this, just locking it at 60. That way we don't really even have to pull 28 watts. Now it's time to check out some emulation, and while we're here, I figured we could test this D-pad out with a fighting game. And I've always had really good luck with these OneX D-pads, never really given me an issue. They are a bit slippery than normal. I kind of wish there was a little bit of grip on them, but as you can see, I mean, it's definitely got a gloss on it. This is the Dolphin emulator. We're running a Wii game, 1080p, Tatsunoko versus Capcom, and when it comes to GameCube and Wii, this is going to handle it just fine, even at those lower wattages. A really long way in the last few months is the Zinnia emulator. This is the Canary build, and here we have Red Dead running on an APU. Now, it's not going to run it at 60 FPS, at least at the TDP we can get to on this handheld, but 30 with this game is still really hard to do. If you've ever tried this out on a lower end system, you know this game is just really hard to emulate with Zinnia. And finally here, I figured we'd take a look at some PS3 emulation. And when it comes to RPCS3, there are games that don't take as much wattage, there's games that need a little more, and this is one that needs a little more. We've got Skate 3. I've got this set at 28 watts, and at 28 watts, 720p, yeah, it's going to run it really well. But with the easier to emulate games like Demon's Souls and even Tekken 6, we can get away at a 15 watt TDP on this handheld. So when I was doing my testing, I used hardware info to kind of monitor the total system power draw from the battery, and this includes everything on the handheld. Remember, we've got a 48 watt hour battery, and this is just a rough battery life estimate. Screen brightness was set at 75%. With the TDP at 15 watts, total system power draw from the battery is 28.7 watts, and at 28 watts, total system power draw is around 46.9 watts. So with some basic math here, at 15 watts, I could have theoretically got around 1 hour and 42 minutes of battery life, and at 28 watts, that would drop down to about 1 hour and 2 minutes. And remember, everything on this handheld plays a part in pulling power from that battery. The RGB, screen brightness, even the volume, and especially the TDP. So obviously, easier to run games and emulators will net you a lot more battery life given that it doesn't have to pull so much. So yeah, the new Ryzen version of the ONEXPLAYER Mini Pro is definitely performing really well. It's on par with the other 6800U handhelds on the market right now. So choosing one is really going to come down to personal preference. You know, which one do you like the look of? Which one do you like the feel of? And of course, I'd say software or proprietary software that goes along with that handheld. Some of these companies do have much better software when controlling fan speed, TDP, and things like that. And I will have a full video with a few different comparisons coming up very soon. I've got 4 6800U handhelds that I want to kind of do a big face-off against, but that's going to wrap it up for my first look video at the ONEXPLAYER Mini. If you've got any questions, or if you're interested in seeing an eGPU attached to this thing and kind of turning it into a full-fledged desktop, let me know in the comments below. And if you're interested in learning more, or maybe picking up this new handheld, I'll leave some links in the description. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. Like always, thanks for watching.